Lucid, and
Popbot.
we're coming with you with another episode of a kind of a calm week. Got a little bit of setup for our final episode of Captain Falcon. That's the name of the show. Don't at me.
Captain Falcon.
And some interesting things have happened. Like, for example, the appearance of Madam Hydra, and what I think has some kind of interesting implications for what will probably be Phase 5, I think. What were your thoughts on the episode?
So many thoughts. Again, I'm coming from a very different generation, but a generation of comic book lovers, but I didn't see people that look like me as much as you are seeing people that look like you in the comic books and the movies that are out. You know, I was always picking up a comic book and there were no black men on the cover. And when you saw black men inside, they were usually some kind of thug or gangster doing some nefarious activity, right? So
or king of some fictional country.
Wow, very rarely that. I mean, if you go back and look at just the number of comics that were put out. So for instance, talk about Black Panther, right? Whereas, let's say Black Panther March 1981 episode, 37, and I'm just making up numbers. That would be on the comic book rack for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? Compared to it came out the same day that Spider-Man, March 89, comic book 287. That would be on the rack for 4 months, right? If it lasted that long. You know what I'm saying? So it's those kind of weights when it came to comics, and again, I don't want to skew from the goal of this podcast, but anyhow, that episode brings out all the feels, the very poignant line. Hopefully, are we gonna? How much are we gonna talk about this? I mean, are we gonna warn for spoilers? Hello?
I think the title of the episode kind of accentuates the fact that we're going to be talking about this stuff.
Okay.
So I'm not too worried. I'll put something at the beginning, but I think anyone watching us will know that at this point we'll know that Disney stuff, we're going to be talking about it after it happens. Other things like The Invincible, we warn about that, but Disney stuff we're probably going to talk about after it happens because things are happening so fast.
Okay, so that line that Isaiah said that no self-respecting black man would carry that shield, that was so deep, and deep for me, on many levels.
For me, it was all like, oh man, yeah.
And then as a veteran that has served this country, that has literally or actually gone to war for this country, to hear those lines, because I consider myself very much a patriot, right? I acknowledge all of the opportunities that America has given me, and I'm patriotic because I understand the price of freedom, which I believe 90% of Americans don't, right? I won't say 90% because we have a large veteran population, and I believe they do understand that freedom isn't free. But that is that line, they're doing a good job of making this show and touching on political topics that need to be touched on again and again. That's the thing. I think we forget that some topics, because they're ever evolving / ever present, need to be addressed again and again and again and again until it's no longer a topic, until the problem is gone. It's like if you have a cough, you treat that cough until you're no longer coughing or have shortness of breath. And I think we don't get that America is still wheezing, right? We're still coughing. We're still in the throes of the fever that is bias and racism and all of these other things. But anyways, again, not to skew from the topic.
But that's a great point you made about because even me, like when I was watching it, watching it with KK, it was I was like, and she's a huge activist, she's a huge ally. So it was, and we both felt it differently. And of course I felt it as a younger, and I want to say young black man because I ain't young anymore, But of someone that has, like, seeing the change, right? As same thing with you. I had a few black images, right? I had Static, and that was kind of it. There wasn't really, like, even when I was younger, there wasn't really that many black superheroes left to. There was like, yeah, like John from the Green Lantern, but right, and then, but it wasn't until like I was in, I think, college when they really started to introduce people like Miles Morales, Black Wally West. I mean, we had Cyborg, right? Cyborg and Static, like those were people I could really look up to in terms of black male figures. Even Marvel didn't have that many. Marvel, their black female figures were actually mostly more female. They had more female prominent black figures that stood out than I think male. Like with for example, Storm. So like hearing that line, especially as someone who, the child of veterans, the child of two veterans, one talking to one of them, that line hit me a certain way because as someone I was like, and a brother who is also currently serving, I have certain feelings about the military, and I think Isaiah, that line spoke very specifically, I think, to the people that have watched it tear their families apart, like the negative aspects that fighting for this country has had, while it hasn't really necessarily fought for them. Because like that story where he fought for his brothers, right? He fought for that country, did their wet work, and they're like, screw you guys. And I think that speaks huge to a story of a lot of, I would say, black veterans who are probably like, lost limbs, who lost their sanity. They didn't get as many opportunities from it, from just sometimes not even their fault. And, and probably in their eyes, that shield took everything from them, right? And then to have that kind of resentment that Isaiah had when at one point, like especially in the comic, he was a patriot, right? He was doing this for his country, and his country, turned his back on them, on them. And I'm interested to seeing how they continue this forward, just going forward, right? Like how, like it clearly in the case is his new Captain America suit with wings, right? With the star, probably with Wakanda metal, vibranium.
Well, we don't know that that's it, but of course that's it.
Yeah, obviously, right? It's like, what else is it gonna be? Right? This whole episode was very much that, I guess the final tease, but really it was just the confirmation of the fact that, like, he wants to continue to fight for it, right? Fighting for the boat, at the end, just not giving up. Like Sam has realized that, like, I'm going to fight for this, right? So we're gonna have a Captain America. We're gonna have a black Captain America fighting U.S. agent, as we saw with that final scene where he's making his shield. So John Walker is gonna be probably picking up the mantle of the U.S. agent under that Val lady who is Madam Hydra. Which is kind of like, Contessa. But it's kind of crazy that they're bringing her. I'm like, oh wow, okay. They're really like digging into obscure characters. Like, how are they gonna make her important? I think this tells me that they're gonna heavily start including more Shield stuff, because again, this is the most Hydra we've gotten since outside of Agents of Shield since Winter Soldier.
Why do you keep calling it Shield stuff? You mean they're going to bring in characters and plot lines that were in Agents of Shield? Because I look at this all as the Marvel Universe, and the Marvel Universe is broken into sections. Like, you rarely see the X-Men fighting against Hydra, but you often see the Avengers or Shield agents fighting against Hydra. So that's what I'm saying.
Shield, we've been dealing with Avengers. They've never dealt with Shield, with Hydra outside of when Hydra took over Shield, and they tried to take over Shield, and that was again more heavily dealt with in the Agents of Shield. And I've talked about this before. Like, Agents of Shield has always referenced the MCU, but the MCU has almost never referenced Shield. there was almost always this one-sided relationship between them,
So,
where we
so you mean you mean the MCU has never referenced the television show Agents of Shield?
not
That's
I
what you're
don't believe,
saying.
yeah, like not even after Coulson left over, right? Like they didn't really even mention it back in the 90s, right? Where they brought Coulson back as a young man. And they even hinted at they never I'm not, granted, I could be wrong, but as someone who was really into him and someone who was in the Agents of Shield, I noticed that I was like, they've never talked about this stuff, right? And especially going further in when I finally finished it, the plot line skewed so differently, it almost felt like they were completely different universes. They never mentioned the snap in there. Like I said, they had a different world-ending plot that they never referenced to in Avengers, right? They travel through time a bunch. They had their own shit going on. That after a certain while, just they stopped really. The last thing they referenced was Thanos. Thanos was coming, and then Infinity War, and then that was it. And then they were just like completely different shit going on for either one of you. But all this stuff like Madam Hydra coming back, that's like a 7 confirmation for me. The fact that they said that two Shield agents are going to be in Spider-Man: Far From Home, which, as we mentioned at the end of the last episode, that I believe it's going to be Fitz and Simmons, because they're the experts in one weird science, and especially dimension and time hopping. They're the experts in it.
Okay.
So if
I want
any,
to take a look at that. I like
so,
Fitz and Simmons. I really gotta get.
again,
That's
they
just so much time.
again such a good story. Watch it with your wife.
Okay.
I think she would I think she will love their story. Like especially at the end, it's such a good, better love story than Twilight.
Okay. I'll check it out.
But yeah, so believing that, I believe Fitz and Simmons are going to be in there. But that's why I say, like, I keep referencing to saying that they're going to start doing Shield stuff, because it does feel like Shield is not part of their universe. And all this mentioning of Hydra has really been the most mentions of Shield that we've gotten. Well, no, I take that back. Not Winter Soldier, Civil War, because we found out that Bucky was being brainwashed by Hydra, and Zemo was part of Hydra, and right. But even then, that was still small potatoes compared to the fact that they were fighting. But they keep mentioning all of these very direct not even illusions, just straight up callbacks to, like, hey, Hydra is dealing with there's very much chance that Power Broker has some is working with Hydra. I wouldn't be surprised, but there is.
So do you have a theory on who Power Broker is?
On who Power Broker is?
Yes.
Not at all. Not really. Like they're pretty good at that. I unless it's like Sharon Carter, but I find it unlikely.
That's who I think it is.
You think it's Sharon? You think Sharon's?
Yeah, I think Sharon's Power Broker.
I mean, which and thinking it makes sense why, why she wanted Carly so badly, and even actually, you know what? It's in the fucking name. I'm sorry. I can't believe Power Broker. She brokers art. Done. Like she that's literally her job. She's a broker for high value stolen art.
Yeah, I think she went over there and became the Power Broker. Now, it's sad to me because her family has a long history of supporting America, but I also understand her being abandoned and her sacrificing, her career for the Shield, and the U.S. turning their back on them being the one thing that pushed her over the edge. So,
but that's the thing that would make the Power Broker interesting, because in the comic he's not interesting, at least from my research.
Well, again, so yes, but that is the case for many, characters that were developed back in the 60s, right? And then never really put a lot of work into them. They got one or two other series, dedicated to him, but not that much work. You know, these characters that you see that are well developed, you know, the Iron Man, the Spider-Man, the Captain Americas, and even Captain America for a long time, he wasn't developed. He didn't really take hold, in my opinion. What do I know? Until the late 80s, when people really started paying attention to him, and that's because he was being written by a new writer. So the characters start getting developed by all of these comic book companies. They used to. This is the past when when they started
Popular.
garnishing attention exactly from comic book readers. So until then, they could remain one or two dimensional: good guy, bad guy, villain, you know, hero. Um, but writers today, they write very different, right? When that first comic comes out, you're telling a story about the character. You're trying to create personality traits in that character that the readers can relate to. So you're trying to flesh out the character, then build the hero or villain, you know? So
Yeah.
so anyways, that's all I have to say about the Power Broker. You know, back then
It,
that's how they were all designed.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. It would make her interesting because then it makes everything else around we've so far seen about him. Like, for example, the fact that when we first heard about him from Carly, it's the power broker. I'm going to kill you. It's like she's like based that if that's Sharon Carter was like basically selling to Carly and them, I'm going to find you guys and kill you.
Yeah.
And then put a hit out because I'm pretty sure they were the one that the power broker was the one that put a hit out on them in the Madripoor, only to come around and save them. Like, what would have happened if they had gotten killed by that before she showed up, right? And even then, like, when you're with them looking for right, like finding the guy, it would be interesting. I like that theory if they can make it work into all the things we've already seen, right? Where it's like, well, why did you?
I think it does, and I also think it does. I think it can, and I think it does work into. She needs to protect Carly from Captain America. I mean, from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because if Carly falls into their hands, then she is untouchable. It makes it that much harder to get to her and get the super soldier serum and get revenge.
No, I get. I just mean the whole like when she took him to the guy that made it, right? The scientist. They like, why take him to the scientist, right? Why the person making your drug? Why take him? Again, why put out the hit on them? And like I said, I mean, I guess like you said, unless she was really like, fuck you guys, believe that. You guys you're done. Right? You guys, I got the shield from you, and I got lined up, and if you guys die, I don't really care.
So the easy answer, and hopefully they don't take this easy route, but the I spent 10 seconds thinking about this answer is that wasn't the scientist. It was just someone else that works for her that she put in that place to act a role. And of course, she never told him that he has the chance of getting killed, right? But she knew it all the time. At the same time, she may have just done it, if you want to spend a little more time thinking about it, because she truly believed that she knows that Falcon and the Winter Soldier aren't murderers and didn't plan on this guy getting killed, right? On Zemo getting a gun and taking the law into his own hands. And also, I look at her reaction. I look at all of their reaction to that happening. And this is the thing that always throws me off in TV shows and some TV shows is like, I feel like the reaction that some of these characters have to death it's just kind of ridiculous, It's like Zemo just put a bullet in this guy's head, and they're treating him like he broke a glass during dinner, and it's like, come on. But anyways, that's just me.
But that actually that's an interesting point, right? Like, if he was a plant, then that actually that makes the theory a whole lot more solid for me. Where if she had been leading them on a wild goose chase, while willing to let them die, because that's the only thing that doesn't make sense is the hit on them, right? She put a big enough hit on them that the entire city was out to get them. They, John Wick style, right? There's a good chance they could have not have made it out there. Just in the street, right? Like we saw prostitutes in the windows, pew, 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 like
Yeah.
they're going to die, right? And
there.
hey, I'm working on getting into foliage.
Indeed.
But yeah, that's an interesting theory on her is the fact that she would be the power broker. Is she the power broker? So is she the power?
Wrong. It's not a big deal if I am, but
yeah, but I think it would be far more interesting than just some shadowy dude or just like, oh hey, it's an actor, right? I think the idea that we had been that they had been with the power broker the whole time, makes it very interesting, right? But I did want to also hear your thoughts on what you were saying earlier about Invincible and like you said, some of the changes without spoilers up to this episode. And for those who haven't seen Invincible, watch it. This isn't a sponsorship, but just watch it. Skip this time, but so good.
So as a person who just consumes comic book art and science fiction and fantasy novels, I believe that one thing I've learned is that your favorite author hasn't always been awesome, right? Your favorite writer, your favorite artist, they're not birthed from the womb with all of this ridiculous amount of talent, and that these things, such as painting and writing, the more time you spend doing them, the more you improve on them. So why'd I have to, do that little spin up? It's because I loved Invincible from comic book number one. Absolutely loved the story. And it is, no kidding, my all-time favorite comic. Now, there's one competition, but they kind of blew it out of the water towards the end, and that's the Superior Spider miniseries that was Spider-Man. That's the Superior Spider arc in Spider-Man. But at the end, they did what comic books have been notorious for doing, is they undid everything they did in the least creative way, just to set everything back to the status quo. And they did amazing things in this Superior Spider arc. Anyways, it's the best Peter Parker ever. I loved that version of him. And the only thing that came close to that was when Kraven was hunting him and destroying his life. That was awesome. But I loved Invincible. I loved what Kirkman did with this young teenager, his family, and the characters he was facing. I loved the lampooning heroes and the world at the same time, discussing serious issues and some things that happen in the comic book, just like he did with The Walking Dead. There are some really serious things that take place, right? It's not safe for work, not the kind of thing you want your 10-year-old to read. That being said, this cartoon, he improves on, at least thus far in my opinion, he improves on everything he did in the comic book, at the same time transitioning effectively to another medium, and I love it. They have expanded on the relationship between husband and wife, mother and son, and father and son, which is really important to understand where Invincible is going, because his relationship and what he saw of his father is extremely important. I mean, we've already saw what Omni-Man did, right? But Mark hasn't seen that yet. And picture growing up and seeing your father as a protector of justice, one of the most powerful superheroes in the world, fighting to protect the weak all over the globe, and capable of doing amazing things. That's been Mark's entire life, because he's known his father's been a hero his entire life. That's not.
It's like what happens to kids who grow who are kids of serial killers, right?
Exactly.
you're like, he was my dad. All I knew was my dad, and he killed how many
Yeah,
people?
exactly. Yeah.
Um,
And so there's some other things that are going to be explained that you've already seen. But again, he does it in a much better way in the TV series. And maybe I just don't remember the comic, and I wish I just had the time to go back and read it all again.
is this
But
something you suggest? Like, is it because I've been thinking about it? Is it something you suggest I go back and read? Like, if I like, just read it and finish it, or should I just kind of hold it in and kind of save some spoilers things? Because Walking Dead, while they veered off, they kept some of the biggest things. Like, for me, I waited. I was waiting for months for that devastating scene with Glenn, because I knew it was gonna happen. I not even months, years. I knew when it was gonna. I knew it was coming. Every time I was like, oh god, the saviors. Oh no, my poor Glenn. He's gonna go. He's gonna be so. Oh, and they made it just as disgusting. Oh.
yeah,
And it's
I think now that it is on television in the comic book series, I say watch the cartoon. But but that's not me saying don't go back and read the comic book. I say watch the cartoon,
then
and
read
then
it.
go back and then exactly, because Kirkman is changing things slightly, and he's doing it in a better way. For instance, I saw the movie Starship Troopers, right? Again, another campy, throwback to the book, and the book is very much very much different from the campy show that we saw. But I loved the book, right? But I loved the movie too. And again, I was much younger. I don't know how much I would love it today. I was much younger, but I love Starship Troopers.
It's a
But
classic.
I love the book even more, and the book was very different. I think you can appreciate the comic. I mean, you can appreciate the cartoon, and then still go back and read the comic and appreciate that comic just as much, because it's and if this stuff is important to you, you can watch that development of a writer, um, as he does more and learns more. And again, I think, you know, kudos to him and his team, that transitioning of mediums, right? It is not easy to do, and they're doing an excellent job of it in Invincible. And I'm glad they picked the cartoon medium versus live action,
Like, yeah,
because a lot of people are going live action.
yeah. Good luck to Jupiter Legacy. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, that's
How
gonna
you
be.
said the trailer looks good though.
The trailer looks excellent. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I have no reference to the comic, so I don't know if it looks like, man, these guys look really like. I am terrified to see what comes out, what first images we see of Static for this live action. I am terrified of how ridiculous they make his costume look. I am.
I don't think that's a fear anymore, because Marvel has forced Hollywood to get it right. Hollywood has stopped doing stupid things with costumes, and realizing that they can't take what's drawn on a piece of paper, that they can't take that two-dimensional representation of a character and just, pull it out and throw it on a human being, because it doesn't work. We've seen it too many times. So I wouldn't be worried about that. And they've taken the um, they've taken the view that we can improve on this. They've got costume designers. Like, imagine a costume designer that's been designing costumes for 20 years, and someone says, put the Spider-Man suit on him, and the costume designer says, I can do that, but it's gonna look stupid. And the guy telling them to do it is like, it needs to look like it does in the comic book. And the costume designer says, that's not possible. I can change it and make it look better than this thing. Right?
But even but
And
Spider-Man's a poor example, because honestly, it's like, even they're not too different from the comic, right? It's just the more that they add little detail, like more it's not a flat like lycra suit, but they make, like, they give detailing into it. But it's not a huge change to, let's say, Captain America suit, where it goes from like this like skin tight, or like they did in the movie, where they showed that like it was like basically footsie pajamas, into like, no, we're just gonna give him like army like army gear and just color code it.
So I'll say that Spider-Man is not as noticeable, but if you go back and look at old Spider-Man TV series, Spider-Man
Japanese
costume.
Spider-Man.
No, not even the Japanese. We're talking about the television series, the live-action television series of Spider-Man. Um, and then the old Spider-Man comic book, and see how close they tried to make him look, and how not attractive Spider-Man looked when you pulled him out of the comic book. Like, you can make Spider-Man in his original costume look cool in the comic book, but you can't do it. And then flash forward to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and here's what I think is really good about bringing these characters to the big screen in a good way. Their costumes, right? Once they do them well on TV, on the big screen, it improves what you're seeing in the comic book, because what you draw will always look better than what you can bring into reality. So all of these characters have benefited from being brought into the in onto the big screen, right? Spider-Man costume improves. Now they took a couple of steps back with Andrew Garfield's costume. I think they kind of didn't even try, right? I don't know what the thought process, but and his costume wasn't great. But go back and compare, you know, late 80s again, early 90s, before Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man comes out, and you'll see a huge difference. And then once they started getting this right.
That I understand. Okay, that I'll agree with you. But I think that's the same thing with like technology and time. Because like, remember, I'm from the cosplayer world as well. So I've seen some people that have like that done comic book Spider-Man and be like, you know, go take that to the movies. Go film. It's like Disney might want that from you, right? And it's like because it's made well. It's made with good material. I think the problem is just using cheap material. So yeah, cotton. If you make a Spider-Man suit out of cotton, yeah, it's gonna look like trash. But if you made it out of, you know, even like a pleather, right? A certain pleather that's specially coated, it looked pretty good. But you can still use that exact color scheme, right?
So, yes,
or even like or a what's the word? Especially woven polyester, right?
Yeah, to me, you know, someone who knows nothing about fashion design and clothing, to me, it's a combination of those materials and the engineering of the actual outfit,
which improves over time, right? Like, you know, we got, you know, designers today are much better than designers of the 80s, because those 80s, even the people designing in the 80s, they've gotten talent, but I think there's new techniques able to do, like, I don't think they couldn't have made, you know, they couldn't have made Andrew Garfield, not Andrew Garfield, they couldn't have made Tom Holland's suit back in the 80s, no matter how much they wanted to try. They couldn't. Hell, a lot of his suit isn't really his suit. Like, we see that if you look in the behind the scenes, a lot of these suits are all 3D. So that's also another thing you have to consider, is that many of these suits aren't actually even on them or even on there. The screen,
yeah.
Right?
Which I think is, again, I think that supports what I'm saying, is that they realize that they can't even make this, right? They can't make this. They can't have the characters move the way they need to move. So,
but I think it's also,
I think that's really important. Yeah. But that does support your point that, you know, you couldn't do this back in the mid 80s also.
Yeah. But I think that's also just because of like the way, and not to, because we can move, I want to, you know, wrap this show up and so we can move on to our next one. But like, just like this silhouette, this superhero silhouette. Like, if you look at like those videos of like how Iron Man has changed over time, and how they you look at him like, oh yeah, no, there's no way anyone can fit into that. His insides would be absolutely crushed.
Yeah.
Like, no human, especially no human man has a waistline like that. Yeah, what is right? But you're like, but superhero, it looks dope as shit, right?
Exactly. And that's what they're trying to do. You know, comic books were for little boys originally, right? And then the covers of a comic book that's for a little boy is far different than the cover of a comic book that's for a little girl. But they draw it differently because our brains are different, and little boys want to see beefy guys and really pretty girls, and they need to be shaped a certain way, and those proportions are, again, that's why the term comic bookish, right? Those proportions, they're not real, right? And so yeah, we want to see a guy with a 20-inch waist and 60-inch shoulders, from so
How it's like doesn't break in half.
Exactly, because that's what would happen. That's what would really happen because, physics apply to things existing in the real world, but not to things existing on the page of a comic book.
But yeah, so my final thoughts. I want to get your final thoughts on the Justice League's the Zack Snyder one, and not just like review thoughts, but I don't know if you watched that video I sent you about the timelines, but there's a lot of controversy going on with the fact that DC, I guess not DC, but Warner Brothers doesn't seem to want to go forward with Zack Snyder's verse, and it's just like we're going forward with the universe we were working on with Joss Whedon and everybody else. All right, yeah, so, this was just a one-off for you guys, but some people are, or specifically one person is speculating that actually it is all one universe, and this is just two different timelines.
I watched the video, right, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully that is the direction I would like it to go in. Many of those things, I don't get as deep into what the circumstances of these movies getting made, and studio execs getting in and spoiling movies or changing out directors, those kind of things. I enjoyed the Zack Snyder cut far more than I did the original version. I felt like the movie was rushed to the point of ridiculousness, which Hollywood tends to do. They want to create a complex story set and believe they can squeeze that into 90 minutes or 2 hours, and it's really hard to do, especially when you throw 7 characters into the movie. It's like, come on, what are we doing? So everything ends up not making sense. So that's one thing. As far as the Josh Whedon verse and the Zack Snyder verse, Josh Whedon has made great movies, but I didn't like the original Justice League. And how much was he limited? I don't know. I liked Zack Snyder's far more, but it was a 4-hour movie compared to a 2-hour movie. So it's like, how much can you you're again comparing two very different things to each other. I hope they keep going along with Zack Snyder's version, because all I can say is that I didn't like Josh Whedon's version. That's all I can say. But had he been given more time and more resources, could he have done a better job? I'm sure he could have. He's a very talented writer and director.
Problematic, but talented.
Well, so it's hard for me to... So when someone is as successful as Josh Whedon, and he has done as many different types of things as Josh Whedon's, you can't say that he's problematic.
I don't know. Well, I mean, the stuff. I mean, I don't want this the podcast to be about, but the concerning things about like how he treated Gal Gadot, and I hate the fact that I'm blanking on his name, but the actor of Cyborg, I think almost to the point where the guy almost quit the movie, because he was being they were severely mistreated by him, like Gal Gadot's like old school career threatened kind of stuff. So it's kind of like, dude,
really.
Yeah, like it was a problem. But yeah, no, I absolutely get it, and I like and for those referencing, it's a film theory by Matt Pat. Those of you big creator, you probably heard of him. But this theory on the fact that the Zack Snyderverse is the good timeline where they did succeed in stopping the end of the world. And Joss Whedon is the one where where everything went bad, like as you see in the Vision, where Lois Lane dies and everyone else dies and such like that, and the world ends, and Superman's evil. Like, I guess that's what happens. Like, that's the Joss Whedon verse. Apparently, that was like that's supposed to be like shots fired at. Like, this is what happens in his universe. But I think if they do go with it, yes, I think the smartest idea is what he said, is to continue. If you're going to continue with that universe, continue with the bad version as if that's the bad version, as if the world is going to end. But this time, because he's already done it, Flash pulls a Flashpoint. And I'll be 100% happy with that if you bring me Flashpoint. I'll be like, I'll forgive you guys keeping on with this universe if you make it a Flashpoint that is good. And it's a fucking Flash's story. I don't want it to be about Bruce. Bruce doesn't even exist in Flashpoint. I want his little badass dead. I want it to be about Barry. I want it to be about the story and the heartbreak of his sacrifice for his mother. And sacrifice for his world and sacrificing his mother. Right?
Yeah, see, this is where I think DC has a big problem, though, right? It's that, and so the big problem is this, is that DC feels like the one character has a problem carrying the story, even when they're successful at it. Like the Dark Knight, they were successful telling Bruce Wayne / Batman's story without bringing a lot of other characters and really villainous heroes into it to take over the story. And Wonder Woman 1984, you know, they brought in 2 villains and they did garbage versions of their villains. And instead of just telling a story about Diana Prince or Wonder Woman herself, and then they brought back Steve Rogers and they ended up creating a mess, right? Tell a story, dive deep into one aspect of the character that develops the character, while at the same time, you know, throwing trials at him. You can do that. Marvel has done it. DC has even done it. But they keep falling back on, let's throw as much garbage into this movie as we possibly can, and we're going to have a hit. Somebody's going to like something about it, and you end up hating the entire thing. So, with that being said about Flashpoint, to expect to see a Flashpoint where the other, you know, big 3 or big 4 don't appear significantly, I don't think DC can resist to shoot themselves in the foot again. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with that if they do that, but Zack Snyder way, give whoever 4 hours to do it, right? Because they do show up, and they show up in significant ways that show how different the world is and how much his choices actually hurt the world, right? For his own for his own selfish desire, which, again, I really want, because that is a true thing. Like, it's something I want, KK to be able to see. I might have her watch the cartoon, because it's like, like, for all of us that, have lost a parent, I unfortunately have not yet, and, goddamn universe better, watch the fuck out. I'll fight you. Right? How many of them would I would change time to go and get that, to get them back, right? To change that moment, right? To do something different, and then having to make the choice to not be able to do that, right? Or to even make the choice. I'm like, I'm gonna have to make the choice to resist that selfish desire for the good of man. And really, man sucks, but
Yeah.
But I think that's a good stopping point. This mini-sode that I thought was gonna be a little shorter, ran on a little bit longer. But I'm Lucid.
I'm Popbot.
And there's another episode of TheoristCast. I'll put a link down below to that film theory if you wanted to check it out. And we'll see you next week.